welcome to Bad News Lovers, my ongoing series about literary heroes whom we love, but just as long as we don't think too hard about why we love them. Today's episode is about Jamie Fraser from Outlander, and I have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous. Ladies who love Outlander are, shall we say, really opinionated? But as long as you don't make voodoo dolls of me, I think we can have a reasonable conversation about it. Now, the reason why Jamie's on this list and why he is so far up the list is because he is basically standing in for an entire section of romance heroes. These are men whose primary characteristic is that they are big and they're in love. Oh, and they have a really high sex drive. Now, the author of the series, Diana Gabaldon, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but I have heard her say that she's a little bit upset about the fact that this is categorized as romance, and then she doesn't really think of it as historical romance. And I honestly feel like she should be grateful that the historical romance community is willing to include her. Now, I will preface this by saying that I have only read the first book in the series because I found it really hard to get through the very first book for reasons that I will explain in a bit. But in that book, there is a very curious lack of interiority to any of the characters, but particularly Jamie. Instead of giving him an emotional landscape, what the author chooses to do instead is load up his backstory. So he's got the dead mother, he's got the crazy relatives, he's got the British on his back, he's got an estranged sister, he's got a woman whom he loves but doesn't love him back, he's on the run, he's been tortured. Pretty much all the bad things that could happen to a person during that time period have happened to Jamie. And that is supposed to sort of make up for the fact that we don't really know who he is as a human being. His motivations are apparently to survive and be one of the lads. It's really important for him to fit in, apparently. And I wish I could say that this is not something that we've seen in a bunch of other romance novels, but it's not true. But we take Outlander a lot more seriously, so to speak, because it has become this really successful show and it's made a place for itself in the larger popular culture, which conversely also means that it gets studied in greater detail than all its sister books. So let's first take a look at Jamie. He has no appreciation for his sister. He can't take any piece of well-meaning advice. Literally, he's married to a woman who travels back in time and tells him that he needs to make XYZ decisions in order for him not to screw up the world or put himself in a worse hole than he already is in. And his reaction is, yeah, but my mates are gonna do this, so I guess I'm just gonna jump in the fire with them. When I was little, our teachers used to say this thing all the time, which is, if your friend jumps off a cliff, will you jump off as well? And I have to say, Jamie is 100% that kid who would jump off that cliff. He's pretty, but he's powerful dim. He also beats his wife so he can fit into society. And the book has this justification for it and the way both Claire and Jamie react to that beating. In the book, more than actually the series. I can't really remember how the series handled it, but in the book, there's a sort of feeling that, yeah, of course he's a wife beater, because that's the time he lived in. As if nobody in the 17th century knew that wife beating was bad. And then, of course, Claire educates him and then he feels very sorry about it, but it's just played off for laughs, and it's really disturbing to me. The moment Jamie gets around his friends and his family, it's like he loses whatever few wits he had in the first place. He also has no concept of consent. And Claire, is that special woman who seems to think that's fine, when my man needs it, well, I guess he just needs it. No please, no thank you. And again, these are conversations about boundaries and things, and I feel like at the time when Outlander was being written, and especially of the generation to which the author belongs, these are conversations that perhaps weren't as mainstream as it is today to those of us who are reading it for the first time. But honestly, the only way that I can really describe Jamie in a number of situations is rapey. Which brings us, of course, to the Outlander rape problem. This is a series that has been consistently called out by multiple people, multiple publications and outlets for its depiction of sexual violence. It never seems to stop. And in the first book, it's particularly problematic, but also weirdly interesting when you think about it and you're sort of like doing a deep dive, because it seems to be saying a bunch of different things about sexual violence that just make my head explode. On the one hand, you have this idea that, it's not just Claire who's like almost getting raped or whatever. Sexual violence is also being directed at the man who is, he's 6'4" and he's like very muscled and outdoorsy and he's a man's man. And there he is getting raped in prison. And he's helpless and he can't do anything about it. And it seems to be drawing a kind of weird gender parity association, which is absolutely unnecessary. When women complain about the prevalence of sexual violence in popular media, we're not saying we want men to suffer that as well. We're saying we'd like less of it, please and thank you. There was like literally no reason for that entire subplot to exist. You could have just had him be tortured and that would have been fine. But then once the rape happens and then he's rescued and he's obviously in trauma, the fix they come up with is that Claire re-rapes him. That is disgusting. What the hell was going on in this book? I try not to judge, but every time some woman says that her favorite book is Outlander, I'm just like, how? How do you reconcile that? No, seriously, I want to know, how do you reconcile that? And then later on, there's this whole reveal about how Jamie likes pain and he's a sadist, and perhaps that's why the rape and the sexual violence wasn't that big of a deal. And can I just tell you that I am sick and tired of people writing about terms and about sexual kinks without actually understanding what it entails. Just because you like pain doesn't mean that you're okay with being raped. What the hell is that about? I will admit that sexual violence is one of my very strong triggers. Like, it just really, really pisses me off when I read it. And it upsets me for days on end, and I don't appreciate that in my novels at all. But that said, there are novels out there that do a really good job of it and who address it, and the cavalier way that they address it in this novel, it's just insult on top of injury. That said, I feel like the adaptation might actually be better than the series itself. And a great deal of that has to do with the writing that they do. I mean, they don't fix the rape problem, but I do feel like they do a much better job of adapting it to film. And it doesn't help that Claire and Jamie are so perfect in the series. And I will say that there's one thing I really appreciate about the series and about the adaptation, really, and that is the emphasis on oral sex. We don't really get to see a lot of female characters who are the recipients of oral sex as opposed to the performers. And the fact that Jamie, despite being a virgin, is so into it, I think that sends out a really great message. More of that, less of the sexual violence, please. Jamie is also funny to me because he is one of those characters who has completely succeeded in ruining the life of the person who plays him. Sam Heughan is a beautiful man, and a lot of his more rabid fans have made it their life's mission to snoop upon him and basically pass judgment and hound him on social media, to the point where he has been addressing open letters to his so-called fans. And I've read a couple of responses to that, and the fan argument seems to be that they are just disappointed to find out certain things about him that he does in his personal life. And my advice to you is that if it bothers you that much to learn something about your favorite star, and let me be clear, it's not even him like breaking the law or like doing like truly despicable things, it's more like, who is he dating? Where did he go on vacation? If this is the kind of stuff that upsets you, then maybe stop stalking him online. Don't bother to find out things about him if you can't handle it. He's not your husband. He's not your boyfriend. He's not even Jamie Fraser. He just plays him on TV. But that brings me back to the central problem of Outlander, because Jamie is such a cipher when it comes to his character and what he truly thinks or he believes or he feels, because he just has all these convenient emotions and thoughts and beliefs as per the plot. And so it becomes really easy to project onto him. And it's actually a kind of dirty trick to play on an actor, because then it becomes so much more easy to conflate the actor with the character. And I think that's what's happened with the Outlander fandom. So ultimately, Jamie Fraser is a bad news lover, partly for the things that he does in the novels that are super problematic, partly for the way he is treated himself in the novel, because it then has repercussions on popular culture and how we think about male sexual violence, but also in how he affects real people, from the actor who plays him to the fans who love him. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.